Welcome to Leaders with Heart. I'm your host, Paddy McDonald, and today we have an extra special episode that we're sharing, which is a conversation with my favorite human in the world. This conversation is with my wife, Emina Ashman, who just inspires me on a daily basis, constantly bringing her creative gifts into the world, and the way that she shows up with so much love and compassion and appreciation of beauty is something that I'm continuously learning from. This conversation covers a lot of her gifts, which she brings into the world through her performances and the plays that she's written and the poems that she's constantly sharing with our community. And it also covers our personal journey, because over the past year and a half, we've gone on a really wild ride where through meeting each other and really following our hearts, we've dived into this rabbit hole very quickly, where we recently got married 3 times. And then something else that, we hadn't shared at the time of recording this podcast, but we're happy to share now, is that we're actually expecting our first child in a few months as well, which is incredibly exciting and humbling. And I have so much reverence for the way that this woman is showing up. And I really see her as such a beautiful expression of femininity and someone who is bringing that archetype of, the beautiful priestess and soon to be mother into the world. So I hope you enjoy. I know you will. And please let us know your thoughts in the comments or by reaching out to us. We love hearing from you. Much love. Welcome to the podcast. So I'm here today with my beautiful wife, Emina Ashman, and it's going to be a little bit of a different episode today. We were speaking a bit about making this happen, and I obviously see all of the codes that you have, all of the gifts and the lessons that you can share with people, especially in a business context that maybe haven't had as much exposure to the creative worlds and the performing worlds and these worlds that you've navigated your whole life, really. But I know that sometimes with this podcast as well, it could be so easy for us to box ourselves into I'm in this type of experience, or I'm in this type of experience. And so finding that bridge between that creative world and the business world was something that we weren't really sure what we were going to do with that. And I actually want to let that go today.
Okay.
And just really just have a conversation with my amazing wife about some of the incredible things that you've experienced in your lifetime and that you've shared with the world. And so firstly, welcome. And
thank you.
Thanks for being here. And maybe we can start with where we were last night, because last night you actually shared an incredible creative offering with our community here in Melbourne. There was an event called Fluorescence, which basically was a poetic expression, a poetic reading of a story. And I'd love for you to speak a bit more to that rather than me putting the words in your mouth, because you're the one who is amazing with words.
Well, yeah, thank you. We are both, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like we are both basking in the afterglow of a really beautiful night of honoring and being present with creative expression. So in my words, Fluorescence was a night of storytelling and poetry in essence, but it was ultimately a co-creation that was marrying creativity and community. And what feels true to say in this moment is it felt like the sense of shared sovereignty that we both had, that wanted to be realized through offering love and beauty into the world and sharing that from a place of authentic expression and truth and presence, which, I believe you have massive codes for. You're just the king of presence. And what I mean by that, before I go off tangent, is the ability to really trust in the moment. And I felt like last night was that for me. Yeah, it was a beautiful invitation to be with story and allow for that to move us. Yeah, so in essence, it was a poetry night filled with spoken word, poetry reading, cacao, cake at the end, which was awesome. And it was also used as a means to softly and intimately launch a poetry track that I released internationally, on streaming platforms. And I chose the word fluorescence because it really speaks to this part of me, and I feel like this part of the world that is coming out of a space of real introspection and reflection and darkness in some ways, but yeah, just these quieter, subtle landscapes within us that are maybe now ready to come out and express themselves in the light or just in the sun, if that makes sense.
Makes
like
a lot
a
of
flower
sense.
blooming. So that's, I feel, where that has stemmed from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really interesting to me hearing the poetry last night and also in the process where with a title like Fluorescence, I was expecting a lot of really flowery and light and bright imagery and storylines and themes. And that was there, but there was also a lot of darkness and the pain that you had been feeling internally in the process as well. And I love hearing what you said there about this being reflected in the world, because it's certainly something I think a lot of people can relate to, even if they're not seeing it in themselves. They might be seeing it on the news or out in the world, and really just trying to make sense of what's the purpose of all this suffering that happens in the world. And so the way that it was woven into the storyline and the flowering process, I thought was incredibly beautiful and incredibly inspiring for us all to take into our own lives as well.
Yeah, thank you. And, when I mention the word darkness, I do want to observe it and be with that sense from a place of non-judgment, trusting it. It's not necessarily a negative experience. Yes, it's uncomfortable and different, but there is space for that in our universe. And yeah, just being able to meet with that and really feel into what that is a blessing in disguise in a way. And I'm really glad that I was able to translate some form of that through my creative expression. And just to contextualize, I don't know where this conversation is leading, but but the live poetry set that I shared was a poetry reading that was very much based on actual personal experiences and reflections that I've been integrating and processing from last year. So it's very much a very personal offering of mine.
Yeah.
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 Felt that way.
Yeah. That's how I usually like to share. That's the most natural way, I think, for me. I'm not someone that is trying to take a pulse on society around me and speak for people and what the collective is going through. That doesn't feel right for me. And so my way in terms of contributing to, the expression of poetry that is life is from really listening to what my heart wants to say and hopefully trusting that that is enough and that will resonate with those that it's meant to.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of me and less we, and I do that fairly intentionally. Yeah.
I love that. And as much as I'm letting go of the need to bridge this into like lessons for the business world, I also can't help myself. So I want to just continue to bring that lens into.
Yes,
And
please do.
yeah, so I'm really hearing like how often in business, especially, it's really there's a big message of what does the market want, and making sure that any offering and message is primarily driven by the customer's needs. And look, I think there's a great amount of service and beauty in that perspective as well. And I love this perspective of just sharing beautiful offerings of the heart and whatever is our version of beauty, trusting that that will land with other people who resonate with our version of beauty as well.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear more of your perspective on like meeting that edge or dancing with that duality of self and other, and what we want to express versus what might be in greatest service to the world, or whatever we think about that, and just how you relate to that concept.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for letting me lean into that, because it is a tension, I think, that I am dancing with continuously. And I danced with that tension last night in terms of the offering. And yeah, it's something that weaves into my artistry. It's very, very much at the front of my consciousness, because I want to be in service to the world. But what's coming through at the moment is this provocation of like, what is relatability? And when I tune into that in this moment, it is so subjective. Like, who am I to say what's relatable to you? And, you know, that's something I lightly touch on in the form of imagery in the poetry track that I released, is you never know the messages you have for people. You might just be a messenger of love and healing. You never know how you can touch someone. And the only way you can is to trust in your expression. And yeah, in terms of, you know, marketing yourself to meet the needs of an audience, and like for me, from like a performing arts perspective, let's just say the audience, I can't really, like, hand on heart, you know, say I know what people want. I have no idea what they've come into the performance space with. I have no idea what they've been journeying through. And to make that the focus of my work feels hard.
Yeah.
And also a little bit redundant.
Yeah.
And so I have this tension in me, because I keep going back to this inner voice that's, you know, saying is this a bit selfish? Is this really what people want? What's in it for them? Are you speaking too much around yourself? And so those inner thoughts can permeate into my creative process.
Yeah.
And then it's up to me to see how much I want to take in, or transmute. And creating an offering for community, having that word community in it, already lends itself to that provocation. How much is in it for them? And the answer is, I don't know. And so I will do my best to speak from my heart and pray that it's meant to land however it's meant to land. You know, I like to talk about my love for mermaids and how I connect with the imagery.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to you right before the event last night, you know, if someone comes in and they just get this realization that they hate mermaids, great. You know, yeah, I really feel like we're all holding up mirrors, you know, for each other, and art does that. There's a quote from Shakespeare that I can't, you know, remember right now, but really art is like holding a mirror up to yourself. And I feel like we're doing that for each other all the time, whether it's in the performing arts world or the leadership world, the corporate world, you know, we're always doing that.
Totally.
And if we can just sit in that perspective a little, no matter how uncomfortable or awkward it can feel sometimes, I think there's a lot of medicine and a lot of beauty in what might come through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that so much. Yeah, there's a quote actually that was coming up for me as you were sharing that I love and resonate with, which says something like, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is more people that have come alive.
Yeah.
And I really feel that from you, and I feel this from, I think this is why, especially a lot of people in the business, corporate, employment world feel so inspired by artists and musicians and people in the creative world, is because, speaking from experience, we see these people who are just so free spirited and just so alive in their expression of who they are inside. And it's inspiring because it can be very different to people's day-to-day reality, but we all have that inside of us, and everyone has that experience of having done that at least a little bit. And for me personally, that's been like a real deepening into, like, how can that be more of my just day-to-day reality, because it actually feels very much like one of the core purposes of life. And so
being alive.
Yeah, this feels important.
Yeah. And I love that word, alive. I love that provocation of what makes us alive, because it lends itself to the thought that the world is constantly in motion. We're living and, constantly evolving. So it just lends itself to believing that our world is conscious. And when we tune into what makes us alive, I feel like there's so much surprise in that as well. And we're not boxing ourselves, right? And it kind of reminds me of, again, a line that I said last night. I think it was in one of the little song voice memos I did. And it was, in essence, expressing how I felt. It's like, it's our hearts that, it's what's in our hearts that makes us come alive. And I like to describe my artistic practice as heart-led expression, because it's not coming from this place of, what are we tackling here? What are the bigger issues we're facing in the world? I'll be very honest, I'm not someone that writes plays about climate emergency, climate urgency. It doesn't feel true to me to share my voice in this particular medium to speak to those issues and feelings.
I love that.
And there's still a tension in that as well, and it's the same with the umbrella of feminism. I don't call my work feminist theater, feminist poetry, feminist artistry.
Yeah.
You can see it that way if you'd like, but I prefer words like feminine. And I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and I might not be the zeitgeist of, the theater industry. And so I feel, at this point anyway, I'm really listening to the streams of inquisition that feel real for me. And that's around spirituality, around relationships, around transformation, personal journey. And I'm not ticking boxes in the process.
Yeah. I love your really subtle but massive distinction between being a feminist and being feminine. And again, no right or wrong there.
Yeah.
But like, what I hear in that is, again, it reminds me of a quote that is one of my favorite quotes, which is from a conservationist, Gary Schneider, I think his name is, who says, if you want to save the world, don't save it out of guilt or shame or fear, because it's just going to create more of that in the world. If you're going to save the world, save it because you love it. And I hear that distinction in what you shared as well. It's like, and this is just something that radiates out of you. Obviously, I experience it all the time, but I know a lot of other people reflect this back to you as well, that you just honor the divine feminine. You honor everything that it means to be feminine in just who you are as a being. And sometimes I know you don't see it as much as everyone else sees it, but it's something that, like, it just, that sense of reverence and respect and sacredness, for me, like, helps people around you feel that same sense of honor and reverence and sacredness towards the feminine, including women. But, like, we're speaking about an energy that's bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to what I see, and again, there's no right or wrong here, but I often see with any movement, whether it's veganism, feminism, even climate change, like some of these things, which I believe in the actual thing behind it, the energy of, let's say, wanting to make change from a place of judgment of the people that have been judging, have been oppressing that thing. That energy of what then turns into conflict, into some form of us versus them, actually pushes people away from the heart of the matter and the cause. Like veganism, for example, anyone who knows me knows how much I love animals, and one of the biggest proponents for the welfare of animals. And sometimes when I feel that part of myself who wants to judge anyone else eating meat, then I can see myself making them want to respect animals even less, because that sense of judgment coming from within me pushes them away a little. So I just wanted to double click on that, because I think it's such an important point of, you're bringing an energy of love into this piece of, let's say, the divine feminine or creativity or whatever it happens to be. And I see that really magnetizing more people to this as well. Is there anything that you want to say on that? Because I feel like I've gone off on a little tangent with it, but like, it's really important to me, this, what feels like it's a almost like semantics or just like a slight shift. To me, this feels like the biggest thing in the whole world, the perspective that we look at any problem, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm going to try and tease it out and see where I can resonate or speak to that. So what I'm hearing is there are expressions in the world that may be focusing on the judgment or criticism of others. And if I'm to bring it back to my practice, I'm choosing to focus on creating works of art that encourage more love and beauty and acceptance for creation, from a place of reverence. So I think I just want to speak to that a little bit more, because rather than the word judgment or expressions of judgment in society and media or in the performing arts industry, or, I want to speak to reverence, if that's okay.
Yeah, please do.
So what I've noticed is I can be irreverent in my expressions, but I choose to create works that bring in more reverence for life. I love seeing and feeling life as sacred. And when I look at my previous work, I don't know, maybe like 5 years ago, it wouldn't have been as present. That real desire to express life through this space of life is beautiful. And I don't mean that in like a light and fluffy way. Just life is beautiful, life is deep, life is reverent for me. And I want to create work from that space. And that's where sometimes I feel a divergence in the performing / creative arts industry, where there is a lot of work that feels and calls itself irreverent. And there's a tension in that for me. And sometimes I want to play with that tension and be like, yeah, I'll throw myself into that show.
Mm-hmm.
But more often than not, there's a resistance, there's a misalignment there, because I'm not interested at this time creating irreverent work, because I'm really into celebrating how beautiful life is, how meaningful it is. And I'm not a nihilistic person. And there's a lot of nihilistic material out there. There's a lot of dystopian material out there. All I have to do is go onto Netflix, and for some reason, dystopic, irreverent TV shows come up. And I notice that there's obviously a market for this right now. And I could lend my voice I could lend my voice to that space, but it doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't sit well in my body. There's certain shows that have critical acclaim, and there's the word critical again, right? And it's clever, and it's satire, and it's such a commentary, a social commentary on life, but I feel sick watching it. Do I want to lend my voice to that commentary? Or do I want to create and be in an environment that actually makes me feel more alive, makes my heart come alive? And shows and films and plays like that do not. They really mess me up. And, I think you've had your experience of me moving through that last year. There was a lot of darkness, a lot of like instability in my inner world. And I'm sure you could feel that. And certain shows that were being magnetized to me just through that, the Netflix suggestions were not helping with that situation. So I don't know if I've gone off tangent here, but I really want to speak to being okay with sharing how beautiful life is through art. And that's not to negate or bypass resistance, frustration, conflict in the world, because it's present and it's transformational as well. But I want to come to my expression, like I want to meet it and share it from a place of less judgment and less criticism, less binary distinctions. Does that make any sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And I think as well, like you said before, people will hear their own parts of that really is needed. So yeah, I love that. And like, I'd love to also hear about how you've obviously devoted your life to creativity. Like this is such a core part of your being.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it has been since childhood.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of why? Like, why has this been your calling compared to, like, I don't think you were ever called to being an accountant like I was.
Yeah. My relationship with numbers is a tricky one. This realm and appreciation for creativity definitely started moving me from, very early on.
Yeah. And actually, as a side/replacement question for that, what I'd love to really get to is, why is creativity important for anyone? No matter how big or small a part it plays in their lives, why do you believe creativity is a necessary ingredient for life?
Ooh. Okay, what feels really true for me to say is creativity asks for interdependence, asks for relationship. I personally feel like you can't create and this feels paradoxical in a way, but like you can't create from nothing. And this is, I think, more connected to my own personal beliefs that everything is related in our universe, in life, in consciousness. And creativity, when you lean into that, it's holding up a mirror to that truth, if you like. That creativity asks for relationship. And so the more I move into that world of creative expression, the more I move into my love for relating and merging with different thoughts and processes and feelings and experiences. It becomes a dance, whether it's with yourself or a collaborator, you know, an expression of nature that moves you. We are in constant relationship, and creativity lends itself to celebrating that for me. So creativity as a word is as beautiful and powerful as co-creation. And that is a celebration of life itself. So to be in that space, it brings about a lot of opportunity to feel into the beauty of life and what can happen in life. And it's very transformative. I love creating works of art like, you know, poetry tracks and plays, but it's really the process that I savor. And when I feel like I'm not moving through that process or not having enough time and space for it, I feel a constriction in me because I actually revel in that part, you know, that stage of creation. Process reflects so much back to me. Even writing this piece, you know, that I shared last night at Fluorescence, that was a real journey. And through the process of finding the right words to reflect on certain experiences in my life, in that process, I was moved and there was insight. There was a real sense of discovery and transformation in there and healing. And I don't think creative work needs to be healing, or everything we do in the world now needs to revolve around healing. But if it's there, beautiful. And if we have a different name for it, great. But I love transforming through the experience of creativity. I love how it's such an expression of letting love transform, you know, from one medium to another. Just like this opportunity of basking in the afterglow of last night and allowing that to transpire into this, you know, organic conversation we decided to start this morning.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, and what I hear in that and what I would love to hear more about from you is the creativity that we can apply to our lives as well, because like you're an incredible creative performer slash producer of pieces of work, and having been in a relationship with you and being in a relationship with you now, I've experienced your incredible ability to create life, to create co-create a life for us, to have the most incredible experiences and journey together. So like last night was a reflection of that, right? And this is, I guess, is talking to what you said about the natural flow. We created an infinite number of experiences last year, which made last year the most magical year of all time, full stop. And then that flowed into a creative offering last night, which has flowed into a creative podcast this morning. And who knows what this will flow into, not just for us, but for anyone listening to it.
Yeah.
Right? Like this flow of life, it's like being a river just going off into all the different tributaries and
You know,
but eventually going back into the ocean. Right?
I love that terminology. But yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I love how life flows, and our marriage, our relationship is such an expression of trusting in that flow, trusting in spirit's flow, trusting in our expression. There's so much creativity in this relationship, in all the ways, you know.
Yeah.
And you can tell it's making my heart come alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine too. Yeah. So in terms of like creating, I'd love to like talk a little bit about our journey or our relationship or just
Yeah.
whatever comes up really,
Yeah.
but linking it, keeping that thread through this conversation of this creative process called life.
Yes.
And I'd love to hear about your experience of using creativity as a tool in some of the experiences we had last year, right? So just for context, for anyone who doesn't know us personally, and isn't aware of our journey last year, I'll actually just give a little bit more context actually. So after 4 months away in South America, I came back to Melbourne in January. We moved in together midway through the year. Before that, I'd actually followed the guidance and the flow of life to do what my heart was desiring, which was to propose. And from that, again, life guided us to move really fast.
Yeah.
And we got married in June, a beautiful ceremony in Anglesey. And then life guided us to keep creating and co-creating with family as well. And we had another incredible, epic wedding ceremony over in Malaysia in December. And there was countless other incredible experiences throughout that, which some of them we might speak about and some of them we definitely won't. And so I'd love to hear from your experience, whatever's coming up that you want to share about that.
Oh, I want to talk about mermaids and mermaids.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a real testament to what and how creativity can bring about such transformation from a really beautiful and intuitive place. So for a bit of context, I think it was the end of January, and I was really feeling embodied in myself, and I had just experienced a really powerful tantra retreat with you. And I was in this space of, I'm embodied, I'm trusting in my voice, and I'm going to let it out. And I sent you a stream of voice memos of me riffing to royalty-free music. And and there was a particular one, which I actually shared last night, around wanting to be a mermaid oracle under the sea. And the invitation was to come play with me. And after a few exchanges, you sent me an invitation.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, I'll just speak that part if you like.
Yeah.
I just, like, the reality is you're a mermaid. And this might sound weird to people that don't have familiarity with this, but the archetype of the mermaid, when we think about what that means, being someone who is very in tune with the waters and the flow of life, and there's a very divine feminine energy in that. They love to sing, they love to express and be creative. There's many ways we can relate to that. And it's something that you've just had so many coincidences come up around this as well, and so much magic that has just reinforced this concept that in your heart you are a mermaid. And I see that. And
thank you.
Our community definitely sees that as well.
I love that. Yes.
And when you shared that voice note with me about being a mermaid oracle, for me it was just so obvious. I'm like, why are we not sharing this more widely? Why are we not like making it, or why are you not actually like putting on a workshop about how to be a mermaid, basically, was what I was seeing. And but I knew that that might be an edge for you. And so I invited you to co-create that with me. And you can go from there.
I will. So I want to emphasize the word invitation here. I think I was waiting for that invitation, because going back to my love for creation, it really lends itself to relationship. And maybe I hadn't put up an offering around my mermaid expression because I was craving a particular energy of collaboration. And so when you invited me to feel into this idea of a performance where my mermaid expression could be heard and shared more widely with the world, that felt so beautiful. Because I was like, here's an invitation to dance with someone who sees me, who hears me. And I've been waiting for that. I've been craving for that. And the time is now, that's what I was feeling when you worded it so beautifully. You basically described yourself as wanting to be the rock for my mermaid to rest on and share her expression with to the world. And I couldn't have imagined that invitation, that craving in my heart to go with such an ideal visualization.
Yeah.
And that was my full body sacred yes to that invitation.
And just quickly this might feel a little bit out of place, but I do want to a lesson's coming up for me here that I feel like is valuable to share with anyone looking at this through the lens of business, creation, their own journey with career. And that is, and I didn't even have this lesson until you just shared that right then, that is that whenever we want to work with someone, whether it's a client, whether it's a business partner, whether it's getting a job, we're actually asking to partner with them and to co-create with them. And how can we speak to their soul in a way that there's no way they can say no to, right? Like, that wasn't the way I was thinking about it back then, but hearing it back, it's like, of course, like, there was no way that you could say no to that. And there was no way that I could say no to being a part of that, because I was really craving the desire to see your gifts more widely.
Yeah.
And we got that.
We did. And I'll just, speak about how that evolved. So initially we were just speaking to the hypotheticals of me sharing my voice and you using, your recently learnt tools of music production and, experiences with ecstatic dance DJing to, make that happen. And then, after just sharing a few ideas, we somehow came to this resolution or this desire to create a workshop together, a creative workshop together, right, of mermaids and mermen. And you really wanted to lend your presence and your authentic expression to symbolizing the archetype of the masculine holding that feminine expression. And that's when you offered to bring in a cacao ceremony and just really hold space in your beautiful authenticity. And again, that felt so right to be held in that way. And for you to describe that so beautifully and wanting to call in more men into the space as well, and make this a real co-creation between different energies. I mean, how could I say no to that? It was,
And it was a beautiful workshop, and people that came said they got a lot out of it. And there was a lot of practical kind of things that people learned and experienced. But I know there was a bit more poetry and beauty on the night as well. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah. So I think when we were coming up with a workshop, what we were realizing is this mermaid archetype lends itself to being an expression of courage and creativity and beauty. And when we were co-facilitating and experiencing that workshop for ourselves, that energy was so present from, what we were sharing. We were sharing poems that we actually wrote to each other, in 2022 about how we basically wanted to spend our life together, in essence. And yeah, through that energy of sharing courage and creativity, at the end of our closing circle, when it came to my turn, and I was the one who spoke at the end, I actually spoke truthfully that I was now at a stage where I feel ready to be married to you. And I didn't expect it to transform into a proposal on the spot. I really wanted to trust that. Hear me out. Really hear me out in this present moment. Let it land however it's meant to. And we'll find and we'll trust in that divine timing. But I wanted to just express that yearning, that truth, and that feeling in that space, in community, in so much expression of creativity. That felt right for me. And I guess that was an invitation as well, wasn't it?
Totally.
To you. And I'd love for you to respond to that.
Yeah, well, I think people were hearing the different personality types and archetypes within each of us, where you're really bringing that invitational openness into the way that you related to that decision. And then my archetype is more that of a dragon with fire and action, and just when I know I want something, it's like, why is it still not happened yet? Why haven't I done this like a year ago? So when you invited me to that, I don't know how many seconds it was between that and my knee going onto the floor, but it wasn't many.
Yeah.
And so this was something that, like, you know, we'd technically been in relationship, like a monogamous, committed relationship for 4 months at that stage, 4.5 months.
Yeah.
We'd known each other for 11 months. And so in some ways this was quick. In other ways, like my mum said when I told her, it's like about bloody time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just I think one of those things. It's like, cool. It's a knowing. I know. Like the only thing that's going to slow me down from this is fear. So I can just feel that fear and do it anyway. And so I got down on one knee, and what did you say?
I said, can we go to the water?
Because you remember. And there was a big bowl of water and flowers in the room for a water blessing we did. And so we did that. And then...
Yeah, and then I said yes. But I really loved that. I didn't expect that to be the words that, you know, were streaming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Can we go to the water? I was like, what? Am I actually saying that? It was such a surreal moment. But again...
For anyone who wants to see all these videos, there's videos of all of this on our Instagram.
Yeah, I'm so glad we caught that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just beautiful.
Yeah. So just to reflect on the way we started this as well, an inclination from you to share your voice on a voice note to me, just for no reason other than the fact you wanted to sing to me, led to a co-created workshop which added value to a lot of people who came and really brought a lot of beauty and inspiration into their lives, which led to a proposal for us, which has led to so much magic and beauty ever since.
Yeah.
So that thread, it's like, it's making me think of, there's a place in the Andes that's considered the start of the Amazon River, and it's a little trickle. And then slowly, over thousands of kilometers, it winds down, hits the Amazon jungle, and continues to flow, and it becomes the second biggest river in the world, right? Second longest anyway. It might even be the biggest potentially in terms of water flow.
Yeah.
So that feels like a great metaphor for life, right? And creativity.
Yeah, and potential. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you know, I'm sorry. I love geography. I'm just getting all like mumbly now because I just get...
You love geography.
I love geography.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah. Getting all clammy holding this photo.
So
Yeah.
Beautiful. And so let's just feel into, because we will start to close this conversation and there can be more in the future, but in terms of what we've spoken about and what we haven't spoken about, is there anything else that you feel is really valuable and exciting that your heart wants to bring into this conversation?
I do want to say, and it might feel like, going a few steps back, but that engagement ceremony / of Mermaids and Merman workshop fell on my father's 11th year death anniversary.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that. And that was not intentional. And I didn't think that was going to happen. But when it did, that felt perfect, because it was a real convergence of life meeting death and death meeting life. It was a celebration of creation in its honesty. I started that night contextualizing it a bit and actually said 11 years ago, from that day, my father had an asthma attack and passed away. His last words being, "can't breathe." And that same morning, I was doing a 10-minute performance art piece in my drama school, embodying a mermaid, blowing kisses to everyone and saying, "Every breath is beautiful," and pulling out a strand of pearls from, a shell. And I'll just let people sit in the poetics of that, And for me, it goes to show how beautiful creativity can be.
Yeah.
And now I share this date with my dad. I share this other connection, And I'm so glad you share that with me too. And my mother even said, "You've turned this day into a happy one." And I'll just let that be, whatever that means for her. But for me, how beautiful that there was that element of letting love transform. And my dad was a practicing Sufi. And Sufis believe when they ascend, when they pass on, they call that their marriage night, their wedding night. So,
Wow.
Sit in that poetry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. What I really hear in your share there as well is that creativity being as much like, yes, there's an act of creation, of doing or expression, but I also hear the creativity in the lens of interpreting the world as well, receiving whatever life is putting in our path and choosing to see it as poetry.
Yeah. 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 I really believe everything is poetry.
Yeah.
The more you give it, the more you receive it. That's my lived experience of it. The more I share with the world, the more it comes back to me.
Yeah.
And hopefully you're getting to feel a bit of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, more than little. And actually it does feel like valuable as well to talk about, just I think like with that lens of everything being poetry. One of your other codes that I really see is that of the archetype of a priestess. And I really love how much ritual you bring into everything you do. And I also do the same.
Yeah.
And I like what was beautiful at our first wedding ceremony, and all of them actually, but let's speak about that, is the amount of ritual we brought into that, and in our own way as well. Because I think actually it's like beautiful how these ceremonies and these milestones in people's lives have so much ceremony and ritual woven into them through thousands of years of tradition sometimes.
Yeah.
Which actually, and we can speak about this too, but we experienced that in Malaysia, which was incredible, the amount of like tradition and custom that we got to weave into that. And that's one side of the spectrum. And then the other side of the spectrum is what we got to experience in Anglesey, where we got to create it all. We got to like really tune into how do we want this to be for us as an experience, but also as a way to open up a portal, for want of a more relatable word, a portal for life to then flow through. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but just to give an example of that, like our vows, for example, like when we wrote our vows, when I wrote my vows, it blows my mind. And for some people, this is their truth, and that's great. But it blows my mind that these aren't seen by a lot of people as one of the most powerful things that we can do in our life, because it can be said that, you know, our words, when we speak our words out, especially when we're doing it in a powerful setting like our wedding, our community's hearing it, the universe is hearing it, we're hearing it ourselves, and we're committing that this is the way that we want to be. And so I chose to use that as like, great, I get to create my life for the rest of my life with you through the power of these words. And so that intentionality, I felt as like, what an opportunity. And I know you did as well, and your vows were beautifully poetic, of course. So that's just one example. You know, the way we did the ceremony is another way, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on ritual in general. And if you want to use the wedding as a example of that, then go ahead.
First of all, I just love what you said. And you know I love words. And I love how much you love them too. And not just for how they sound. I mean, they have their own frequency and energy, but the real power that they have behind them, through them, you know. There is so much power in what we say. And yeah, being able to write and share our vows to each other from such a personal space was an act of empowerment for me, which I didn't know I'd be able to actually enact if I had my ceremony, my marriage ceremony, performed in any other way, through any other context. So that was really empowering and beautiful. Yeah, so thank you. I just wanted to touch on that. But yeah, in terms of ritual, I think it's something that has been imbued within me from very early on. And different ones have attracted me at different times in my life. But the ones that seem to really make my heart come alive are the ones around honoring water. So I want to speak to that, if that's okay. Yeah, I really feel like when we honor water, we are honoring life for its reflectivity and its openness. And I love using water in ritual. And I might not have done it as overtly as a child or as a teenager, but just in the last few years, I've really come back to the waters in a ritualistic sense. And yeah, it was really beautiful to have our wedding rings doused in water. I was going to say drenched, drenched, doused, dunked in water. Actually, my mum had the beautiful honor of, like dipping it into our bowl of water magic, really.
Which was the same bowl and flower combination that we had at the engagement.
Exactly.
ceremony.
Yeah, the same flowers.
The same combination of flowers as well that we had at our Malaysian wedding, because it came from that lineage and tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love the symbolism of that. And just to have my mother, who I believe is a mermaid in her own way, you know, she was holding the rings and doing a clockwise motion 3 times, and I could really feel the reverence in that, blessing our rings in the water before we were, placing them onto each other. That's just a tiny example of how ritual has really played a part in this, in this ongoing creative expression of honoring our waters and the flow of spirit. So to have our rings dipped in water, to have a sapphire ring that, just looks like it's been found in the treasure trove of a mermaid cove, to be able to call you my merman in the wedding ceremony. There's just so many examples I could, go through, but that was a really beautiful image. And actually, before that even happened, my mum, and we have it right here, my mum, came into the space with our rings in this conch, right? This beautiful conch that happens to have mystical dragons on them. I mean, what more could a mermaid ask for, really? Like, the poetry just keeps flowing. And I think the opportunities of that kind of creative expression comes from the desire to be in ritual and be in ceremony and be open to seeing, where is that in the world? And we can create ritual and ceremony with everything we do. From the simplest act of, dipping our rings in blessed waters, or going to the beach the day after our engagement and offering those flowers, to the sea, and performing cleansing rites with them. And these are things we all can do if we want to. And that's just something that's coming through.
I love that. What I'm hearing in that as well, in terms of like, for people to translate this into their own life, and even you could definitely do it in business as well with teams, and creating rituals for our teams and our families, I think is one of the best things we can do as leaders, is like the why behind, why would we actually want to do this? And for me, it's like, it's all about consciously choosing the energy that we want to be a part of that experience, and then taken forward beyond that. And what I love about like some of the rituals that we chose, bring items like this conch, which was your grandfather's, into the space, and like the rituals we did in Malaysia, for example, is there's often a connection to, or there can be a connection to our lineage, our ancestry involved in that as well. And I feel personally, whenever I connect to my ancestry, I have this great sense of my place in the timeline. And that feels both small and majestic at the same time, right? Like, it feels like, cool, like I am, like, I don't need to get bigger than my britches here, because I am standing on the shoulders of giants. And I have the support of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years of people behind me who have like all made their own sacrifices and choices to get me to this place today. And my role and legacy will last generations to come, whatever that is. So I feel like the ritual for me gets me in that state of like real possibility and humility to act in the way that is the most aligned to my highest path. And do you have any thoughts on your own personal why, as to like why ritual is so special to you?
I think for me, ritual and ceremony does honor my lineages and the beautiful expressions of creation and reverence that they shared with their communities. Whether that's through, family tradition or religion or spiritual practice, there's a beauty in being in that space of reverence and appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
And by being in that space myself, I reflect on the wisdom and the life of those before me. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. And like, I think one bit of context that is, I think, can help this land as well, and also is just, I think, really interesting to share, is your lineage as part of a royal family, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I know this is something that you don't necessarily speak like widely about because you are way more than that as well. But it's something that when I see you connecting to lineage, there is a real sense of all of the ways that the people before you have served in a large capacity, have served a community on a really large level, and a remembrance of your place in that chain. And this is something that, like, everyone's going to have their own version of this, right? Because this is not better or worse. But when I feel into my lineage and I feel into, like, you know, my dad's version of his own, like, humility and choice of honoring, like, family and, like, his own version of contentment, for example, and then, like, feel like, oh wow, like, I've got that within me too. Awesome. Like,
Yeah.
if I forget it, cool, I've got it.
Yeah.
And, like, I just wanted to really speak to how this is something that for you has been, and I'd love to hear yours taking this rather than put words into your mouth, but what I witness is this is something that has been, like, that kind of sits around your everyday experience, right? And is available to be tapped into. But ritual, I see, is kind of a way to actually connect with the wider context of, you know, your story amongst all of these other stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try to speak to that. Yeah. So how does ritual kind of inform my awareness of my positionality in that realm of royalty, let's just say? I think what feels aligned for me is to see and feel myself as a priestess over a princess. In my heart, I'm using that word interchangeably. In certain cultures and in mythology, princesses are bridges of worlds, of heaven and earth. So that's the sentiment that I resonate with or I can be with, especially when I'm moving through a sense of tension with that positionality and feeling, you know, am I princessing enough? By that I mean, am I being in service? Like, let's just leave it at that. That's my quandary there.
Yeah.
But when I sit in this tension and this dance of embodying a princess, I come back to the notion of being a priestess. And with that comes this invitation to be in ritual and ceremony, because that's what I feel from that essence.
Yeah.
When I'm in ritual, I feel grace, whether that's being channeled through me, I don't know, but there's this element of grace. There's this element of intentionality. And that's what I feel when I tap into the essence of royalty. I can't say, again, what the purpose of a monarchy is, especially from, like, a political place. But if I tap back to that desire to honor my ancestors, I tune into grace. And a transmission that I feel from my family, the members in my family, is this expression of grace. And the way that reflects back to me is my own dance between honoring authentic expression and sensitivity and consideration.
Yeah, I feel that.
And I feel ritual and ceremony invites me back to this space of compassion and consideration and grace. And so if there are beautiful acts that I can perform in honor of my ancestors that bring me back to that space, then I feel like I'm embodying myself in essence as a princess, in a way that makes my heart come alive and accept where I'm at in this reality.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I think like one thing that I'm wanting to translate that into is around the concept of leadership and the positionality that you've shared, that any royal family or any royalty holds in a community is one of leadership. And service was the beautiful word that you said there, which for me, leadership and service are often interchangeable. And what I heard you say is that in leadership, there is this delicate dance between like this expression of the heart and consideration for what the collective needs. And bringing that sense of grace into that inquiry has been a real transmission of yours I've seen, and also your family as well. Like, they radiate grace, as do you. And like I feel like this is something that is a very powerful reminder for leaders of businesses, including myself whenever I'm in that context, is how can I serve? How can I be sensitive to what the collective needs while still being true to myself? And this comes full circle to how we started this conversation. And I don't know if we have an answer, right? Like, I'd love to just hear your thoughts on like the kind of resolution of that. And like, I hear the bringing of grace into it, but like when there is a sense of conflict between what the collective needs and what our heart wants to express, what happens next?
I don't think there's like a definitive answer, but what's coming through is conversation, communication, a dialogue, right? I think there were moments last year when we were meeting with some tension around different people's opinions with how we wanted to do things in relation to celebrating our sacred union. And we couldn't have navigated that space without conversations. And I remember you were holding space for my mother at times when I didn't have the capacity to. So I really feel like a conversation is the starting point, or necessary in the conflict resolution, if that's what you'd like to call it, conflict, right? Having a conversation and allowing for the other person to be fully heard in their expression is important. And I think that's something you really share with me. You are so good at really allowing someone to be fully heard, myself included. And yeah, having those conversations, trusting that we're always in relation to someone else with the acts, with, you know, the actions that we take, the expressions that we say. Yeah, there's a diplomacy in that. And again, it's an invitation to really find the poetry that wants to come through, what wants to be transmuted from this space of tension. What can we create in the process? And sometimes it comes out in the form of apology letters, or not even apology letters, but just this is where I'm at letters. You know, I think it's really helpful to try to be in a space of empathy and compassion more than anything. When we can bring compassion to the situation, we're creating space to really find the coherence between our hearts. And that's something that I've journeyed through a lot throughout my life, especially last year. And it's delicate. It's really delicate. And a real invitation to realize how vulnerable we can be, and how connected we all are in that, you know. Yeah.
I love that. I really sense the mermaid energy there as well, of like just of flowing with what is happening there. And
Yeah.
I
Like
often,
there's a bit of stop and starting there, isn't there?
isn't there?
Yeah.
And yeah, for me, I'm often looking for like, what's that black and white answer that I can apply 100% of the time versus like showing up with presence and conversation and dancing with it, and really finding that unique groove that is only going to happen in that form of co-creation. Because I guess even conflict resolution is a form of co-creation.
It is. It is. And, you know, a lot of harmony comes through conflict. It does.
Tension, creative tension.
Creative tension. It's a beautiful space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like even our conversation feels a little ebb and flow, a little like we're bobbing in the sea at the moment. But that exists in life.
Yeah.
And it's those moments where we come up against something and there's an opportunity for, you know, something else to move in that process as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it actually like speaks to an offering that I'm sitting with, because I have this desire to have not poetry workshops, but like I really like the one-on-one engagement as well. And I've been really like tuning into what that offering is. What do I really want to express and explore? And what comes through is this desire to explore the poetics of compassion. So I'm not super interested in creating opportunities and spaces for people to find their expression and just allowing a stream of consciousness. I'm actually really interested in the delicate dance of, you've got this piece of information, data, expression, art, whatever you want to call it, and how can that transform? And what are the intentions behind that? I really love that journey. And so the poetics of compassion is something that I really want to move into in some way. I don't know how that's going to be realized yet. I actually like have a draft somewhere of, you know, a kind of idea. And I want to build on that from like a business perspective. I feel like there's something in that I can offer to the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just want to come back to that word compassion, finding the beauty in the conflict and having the compassion to find it. And see it all as part of the process, part of the creative process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Speaking of which, so you had your own creative process, which has culminated in this incredible track that's just come out on Spotify as of yesterday morning.
Yeah.
So obviously at the time of recording this podcast, whenever this podcast comes out.
Yeah.
So it's called Sentosa Tranquility.
Yeah.
Under the name Emina Ashman. And we'll definitely link that to people in the show notes. To close, is there anything that you'd like to share around this track and the energy of this track, or what it means to you, or anything else?
Yeah, this track is, again, an act of transformation and letting love transform, just in terms of its form. The words from this track actually originated from a sound healing bath that I co-created with my mum's friend in Malaysia, in Jandabai, at this creative events venue called Sentosa. And I did that at the start of last year in January. And so I've allowed for that to be transformed into an audio recording that people can listen to, in a more accessible way from like a global perspective, and not just the people who were there on the day. For me, that's just an expression of letting love transform from one format to another. But also it's an expression of how life can really come full circle. Because when I had that sound healing, when that sound healing was on in January, we were nowhere near where we're at now. Like, we weren't engaged. You were still in South America. Yeah. I had no idea you were going to propose to me 3 months later. And I was, sharing words that felt channeled from this place of service. At that particular offering, I had no intention of bringing in my personal story. I think there's elements of it in there, but the imagery very much revolves around the invitation for the listener to drop themselves into a state of acceptance for what life is and be inspired through the natural beauty around them, the plants and the animals. And, that imagery was inspired by Sentosa, by that beautiful setting, which before it was transformed into a creative event space was actually a family-owned property of my grandparents. So a place where I ran around feeling like a fairy when I was, really young, and also happened to be a place where my parents had a wedding ceremony as well. So as you can see, there's a lot of poetry already there present for me to tap into. And this was an opportunity to actually give back to that space. I had felt that my family had generously gifted me so much over the last few years in ways that I just can't share or translate right now. But one way I could say thank you for your love and your beauty and your expression of generosity is through creating this track for the space that acts as a representation of the love and the creativity that my family has gifted me. So that intention was really around being in service, channeling grace and giving back to that space, and honoring my maternal lineage as well. And so it feels like it's come full circle in the sense that now it's moved into the sound waves of Spotify. And in the span of that evolution, we actually got married, in the Malaysian way at Sentosa in December at the end of the year. And that was a beautiful marriage of honoring our expression and our co-creation and our authenticity and the requests and the desires of my family.
Yeah.
Right. And in a way that lends itself to being in service and tuning into grace and honoring the love and the creativity that is supporting us. So it feels like a gift to me in a way, like being able to say, wow, I have this piece of poetry that is reverberating with like generosity in terms of the energy of my family in it because of how it's inspired me, you know. I have that, but I also am able to share this with the world in ways that, like, I don't know, like how, you know, I don't know how it's going to land on people. I can just share it with the world and trust in its fluorescence, trust in its expression. I don't know if that sounds a bit convoluted, but yeah, again, it's an expression of letting love transform, and letting creativity speak for love, or, you know, letting your love speak through creativity.
Beautifully said. And for me, it's an experience. It's an experience of tranquility. And so when I want to feel tranquility, I put the track on.
Great. So that's how it's relatable and, you know, connecting for you.
Yeah, exactly, which is personal.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, gorgeous. I love you. And I'm so grateful for you being in my life. And I'm so grateful for you more and more sharing parts of your soul and your heart with the world, because I believe this is powerful medicine for the world in a way that is going to help other people flower and help other people shine their light and their beauty with the world as well. So I am obviously such a fan and really encourage anyone else to check out this track on Spotify. And if you want to reach out or connect with either of us, you can find us on the socials.
Yeah,
and,
the socials.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Leaders with Heart. We appreciate you being here and helping us spread this mission of seeing the world led by inspiring leaders who are living from their heart and fulfilling those around them to bring the world into a place of harmony and peace. And through our work at Leaders with Heart, we're also engaging in coaching with leaders and organizations across the world. So if you'd like some support in that space, reach out via the website, leaderswithheart.com.au, or the links in the show notes. And if that's not your journey and you just want to continue to connect with this vision through listening to this podcast, we massively appreciate you too. You can also share the episode, like, comment, subscribe, leave a review, all the things. And myself and the guest appreciate you massively for supporting this mission. Thank you and have a beautiful week, and we'll see you soon.